pair with critical vehicle function.
Welcome to Future Thinking, episode 113. My name is Alexander Schatten. This is again an English-speaking episode. Stay tuned for more German episodes in the future. This is also a special episode. Until now, I had essentially two types of shows. I had monologues, where I prepare and present the topic, and conversations where I typically speak with one guest, rarely more than one. This and the next episode are impressions from the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference that took place from November 1st to 3rd in Prague. This is a conference where people meet to discuss projects and activities that aim to increase liberty in our societies. The audience is generally leaning towards libertarian ideas. However, the range of ideas, initiatives and projects is quite astounding, and some perceive themselves as explorers of our time. The understanding of what progress means, for instance, is typically rather different here compared to other guests I had on the show. But that begs the question, successful societies tend to embrace explorers and risk-takers. Today it seems to me, though, that we fear everyone who questions the existing state of affairs, which is, as it seems to me, ironically the opposite of a progressive mindset. One of my guests in this podcast, Tatiana Butanka, put it like this: I love that there are so many different projects. Indeed. So, what exactly is our problem in letting people try out new things? Who is harmed by experiments that volunteers do with their time and money? Maybe it could turn out that some concepts presented are more successful than the heavy-handed state interventions that many believe in today. And politicians might worry to find out that other ideas are more successful than their concepts, structures and ideologies. Weak minds do not like to be challenged, one could argue. Anyway, I digress. I had shorter conversations in these two episodes than usual, including 6 presenters from the conference over 2 days, and I will bring you 3 guests in this first and 3 in part 2 of this episode. Indeed, many different projects were presented and discussed. These 6 people give you an idea about the range of ideas. However, do not forget to check out the show notes. You will find links to the conference website with additional information and talks. Furthermore, there's dedicated podcasts concerning free cities, which will also be referenced in the show notes. As always, I do not endorse or judge any particular idea, but I want to give an impression of the wide range of ideas and projects that are out there. I think it can be very refreshing to see what approaches towards life and liberty other people have, especially at a time when our established systems and ideals are crumbling and clearly not working in numerous instances. What I find fascinating, what resonates very much with topics discussed in other episodes, is how experimentation is a core aspect of any dynamic society. Progress requires, I believe, educated experiments, strange minds and weird ideas. Many will fail, some will succeed, and all will inspire and be learned from. As another guest in this episode, Lauren Razavi, put it spot on, we need revolutionary thinking but evolutionary approaches. We will discuss in these 2 episodes how much collective action is required in a society and how much freedom and liberty is desirable. Did the pendulum swing too heavily towards government interference and what we could call a nanny and surveillance state? What can we do to change that, to get out of our stasis? I had a number of interesting and lively, controversial but always constructive discussions at this conference. Participating in such discussions seems beneficial for everyone. Well, at least it was for me, and I'm quite sure it will be for you too. Finally, some short additional remarks before we dive in. In some episodes, projects suggest new financial investment instruments. Unnecessary to say that there is no financial advice given in this podcast. As a full disclosure, Titus Gebel, who was guest in 2 previous episodes, number 77 and number 108, invited me to this conference. That is, I paid for the trip myself but received a free ticket to attend the conference. Also, if interested in a German conversation about these topics, please have a look at the mentioned previous episodes with Dr. Titus Gebel. Finally, this podcast is free and without advertisement. If you like what you hear, you can support me. Don't send me money though, rather subscribe to the podcast, provide some stars or thumbs up or whatever is available in your podcast directory of choice, and recommend this podcast, these episodes to colleagues, friends and family. Now let me give you a brief overview about the conversation in these 2 episodes. I will talk in the first episode with Massimo Mazzone, who is building a blue-collar free city in Honduras, Vera Kichanova, who is an urban economist, and Tatiana Butanka from the free Community of Montelibero. And in the second episode, I will talk with Lauren Razavi, who's building an online country for digital nomads. Then Grant Romand, builder of floating homes. And finally, I talked with Peter Young from the Free Cities Foundations, and this conversation with Peter was recorded at the end of the conference, so we both reflect our experience of the conference. Now, without further ado, to the conversation with Massimo Mazzone. Massimo, thank you for taking time.
This is my pleasure.
We could start with a short introduction of yourself.
Well, I'm Italian. I'm 60-year-old, but I lived 30 years in Central America. I married there, 4 kids, and I'm an entrepreneur in Central America. My main business is the largest chain of pharmacies in the region. I've been a libertarian all my life, and with the ZEDE law, a law, very aggressive law in Honduras, I think I thought to do something concrete.
We are at the conference, Liberty of a Lifetime is the name. So this begs the question, why a conference about liberty? I mean, some people would say we're living in democratic societies, and I mean, how is that a topic even any longer?
Well, democracy, especially a democracy that compel a minority to do what they choose, it's not liberty. There is a famous Churchill aphorism that says that democracy is the worst of all the system apart all the others. And in a way it's true. I mean, the best system is liberties. There are very few things that need collective actions in the traditional contractual state, social contract of Hobbes or Rousseau. I mean, probably you want to have centralized security and you have to decide who's the sheriff. That's you need collective action. But outside that, you don't need collective action. Now, when the government start to become bigger and bigger, and they start to redistribute money, at this point, this opened the door to steal and to live out of taxes. And there are vested interests, people that receive the money, a part of the money, because a part is stolen by politicians. But really, in a free world, we would need very little collective actions. Actually, I think there is a way of not having collective action at all.
Do you feel that this is an opinion that more people share these days, or is it still more like, let's say, an opinion of a smaller minority of people?
Traditionally, it's an American opinion. Libertarianism was born in England, but since the 60s is an American phenomenon. I say that probably 2%, 3% of Americans share what I said. Most of the guys in Libertarian Party and some of the guys in the Republican Party in the wing of Ron Paul and Rand Paul and Justin Amash and so probably 3%. In Europe, it's much less, but it's growing. And one of the reasons has grown exponentially in the last 2 years is the shameful behavior of the states during COVID. And people, it's waking up.
Now you have a very interesting project in Honduras. Maybe you can describe a little bit what you're doing there, or what you were doing there, or what's the future of that?
Well, basically, it's technically it's called a zone, ZEDE, Zone of Employment and Economic Development. In a way, there are 6,000 or 7,000 special economic zones in the world. Most of them are private. But no one of these is residential. People just go there in the morning, they work, and they go back to their houses in the evening to the police that extortionate them. I mean, not in our country, but in the developing world, it's pretty common. To an indecent school, to a healthcare that doesn't exist, to infrastructure, where in Honduras especially you see kids playing with black water, with sewage. So there are a few that are residential, but these are owned by the states. These are the great special economic zones like in Dubai or in Shenzhen and so. There are no private economic zone, special economic zone that allow people to stay. The law in Honduras is the first. So what's the agreement with the government is we provide local public service, which means healthcare, school, police, commercial judiciary, not the criminal judiciary that remain in the end of the state, and infrastructure. So we charge with a tax that in my case it's only 5% on income. We don't have other taxes. Our clients, people that lives there, both companies and individuals, we have to provide these services, and 12% of the tax take goes to the government to pay for national level public goods like the airport, the army, and criminal justice.
Now, one prejudice that you often hear when you talk about such ideas is, well, some millionaires make their, their gated communities or something like that. And I think, especially in that regard, your project is quite interesting.
First of all, the Z allow for expansion. So, in particular, our Z it's in the industrial district of Honduras. We rent at $150 two-bedroom houses, and it's very low cost opportunity. But it's possible that in future, more richer person will decide to come. And we have a special a special institutional arrangement. We do not sell land; we just rent. This is something called Entrecom, Entrepreneurial Community. It's a theory coming from Spencer Heath and Spencer McCallum. And it's like a mall. So a person that want to rent a space to sell watches, ask the owner what's the price, what's the level of security, and then decide if he wants to go in or out. There is not collective action. It's not that every year the tenant organize a strike to ask to lower the rent. The same thing is for us. With the advantage that we can grow. So, for example, now we are only 45 hectares, and we are building at the very entrance of the community. That, if we are successful, it's going to be the most valuable piece of land of the entire community. But what we can do is to buy another piece of land close to us, contiguous, build the same houses. First of all, we do 3 months lease, so we could just wait for the end of the lease. But if you have a cherished clients that have been, you had a good relationship for many years, you say, I'm sorry, I have to move you because this place I can build a high rise and put McKinsey inside and making 10 times the money that I make with you. But there is a house, it's just like yours, it's new, and I throw 3 months of free rent if you move. It's just 1 kilometer away. So basically, if the person is reasonable, he will accept to move.
But the bottom line is that I think you show that these concepts can work on also very low economic, people with very low economic potential.
Absolutely. The point is, if you come to Morazan, the name of my community, you won't see mentions of $1 million because this guy makes typically $450, $500 per month, so they can spend a maximum of $200 on rent. In our case, they spend $150 all included, including security, including gardening, landscaping, and so every person that can make a favor to somebody else and charge for it is basically a working person, because that is the definition of work. And if it's a working person, he has disposable income and he has other needs. So it's a potential client. You have just to find the product that are good enough for them, and it costs you less than what the other people pay.
Now, the motto of the conference is From Vision to Reality. Now, would you say you've shown how reality could look like? How do you see this type of ideas getting ahead, already leaving the vision state, or are we seeing some backlashes?
Well, we showed that it works because from mid-21 to mid-22, we were working, making money. In this very moment, we have a line, we have about 250 residents in the community, and we have a line of 200 families that wants to come to us. And we are making money, not much, but we are making money. So we demonstrated it works. It's probably the best things we have done so far, because unfortunately a leftist party very close to Venezuela came to power in November 21 and has been trying to squash us since then.
And if you look beyond your own project, how do you see the development globally?
There is a tendency of, especially the big country, the European country, but also the US, to eliminate diversity. For example, this minimum tax of 12%, all the know your customer laws, the weaponized use of SWIFT by the US. On the other hand, it's very difficult to have a cartel with 160 or 170 members, whatever it is, the number of sovereign in the world. So they have a tendency, everybody has, all the big country have a fiscal problem. Fiscal problem that they will never resolve. There will be either repudiation of debt or an incredible bout of inflation. But they tried, like in any cartel, to undercut their friends, their friends in crime, because cartel is a crime. And so, for example, you see Portugal or Italy or Spain coming up with this opportunity for high net worth people to go there and not to be, I mean, they pay a lump sum, it's 100,000 euro in Italy, and they don't pay any other taxes, well, indirect taxes, like VAT. In Switzerland, you can do it by canton. It's something like $400,000. I think in Spain, it's 100 euro, just like in Italy. And there are many examples, not only example of small Caribbean haven, but I mean, Italy is pretty much a heavyweight in terms of, it's one of the top 10 countries in the world in terms of GDP. So yes, there is, like in any cartel, there are rules of the cartel that are completely liberal and they are terrible. They are the rules of this Davos bullshit. But at the other end, there is a tendency, a centrifugal tendency that is simply the animal spirit of man, like Adam Smith would say, applied to countries.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking time for some brief questions.
Thank you.
Could you maybe introduce yourself briefly for a minute or so?
Yes, my name is Vera Kichanova. I work as senior economist for the Free Cities Foundation and also as an urban policy advisor for Zaha Hadid Architects, an architecture bureau. I have been involved in urbanism for over 10 years. It all started back in Moscow, where I was born, when I became the first elected libertarian in Russia. And Russia was already sliding towards autocracy back then. So it was very challenging to represent ideas of freedom in this environment. But I gained a very important experience. I've had a chance to look at how cities are governed from within, how they're managed, and I would say they're mostly mismanaged. And that inspired me to dig deeper into research and whether there is a free market-based theory for governing cities. I wrote a PhD about private cities in London, and that's how I met the whole crowd. And that's how I ended up here working with Titus, working with Patrick Schumacher, the anarchitect, as we call him, and advising real-life free cities, private cities, charter cities projects.
Now we are at the Liberty of our Lifetime conference, or in our Lifetime conference. This begs the question, liberty. So why is this a topic that is particularly important for you? Because if you would ask many people, they would maybe say, but yeah, we live in democracies, and so, I mean, everyone is free, so it has liberty. So why do you still think this is an important topic?
Well, I was born in the Soviet Union. It collapsed a few months later. Probably no coincidence. But I meet much more people in Eastern Europe. We are now in Prague, which used to be part of the Eastern Bloc, part of the communist world. And I'm meeting a lot of people who cherish liberty in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, in places who have seen how bad it can be on the other side of the spectrum. And I've seen countries like Russia that have gone completely autocratic in a matter of a decade. And I see that, yeah, freedom should not be taken for granted. And especially, I think a lot of people have realized it in the past 5 years because of COVID, because suddenly even in countries which are by and large democratic and liberal, people suddenly realized that in theory governments have all these tools to intervene in their private lives, something that we coming from, less free countries have always known. And that's when I think the whole Free Cities movement started gaining momentum. 2 years ago, there was the first conference after COVID, and it was many more new faces here. And so many people realized that they don't have to be tied to one particular location. So on a local level, when you don't need to go to office to work, and on a global level, when you don't need to be based in a country that you didn't choose.
So you think that growing interest in liberty and topics of liberty is not just a phenomenon for people who lived in previous countries like Russia, but it's also a phenomenon that is growing in Western countries like Europe and the US?
Yes, absolutely. If you look at the geography of where people come from to this conference, they are from everywhere, from Honduras and Guatemala to Singapore, and a lot of people from the US, a lot of people from different European countries. Yes, I think that, as I said, in the past few years, people have realized that freedom should not be taken for granted, basically. And they are not tolerating even this, what we coming, from a more unfree perspective think as minor infringement on your liberty, because you think that you want to have more choice. So liberty is also about choice, as choosing the communities you want to associate with, choosing the rules that you want to govern your life, choosing people you want to associate with and live next to, choosing governance model, financial models, currency, all of these things. So we have been able to choose some of these things for a long while, like what currency you want to operate with, but not others. There is this concept of a social contract, that we as a society sign a social contract with the government and exchange some of our freedoms for protection. None of us have actually signed it. Now they're trying to build, for example, in Honduras, we just listened to this lecture, they are trying to build probably the first society in history where you actually actively have to sign an agreement of coexistence, which is a real life social contract. That means that nobody is forced to follow the rules. Everyone who joins the community joins it voluntarily. A society based on voluntary agreement, voluntary coexistence is also what freedom and liberty mean for me.
I think what you said now already leads us a little bit to your topics of interest, like your research interests and what you're working at the moment. Would you tell us a little bit about your interests there?
This year's topic is From Vision to Reality. That's what I've always been interested in. I've been fluctuating between working on visionary things and working on hands-on practical things. And I think it's very important to create this pipeline. That's what I'm doing with the Free Cities Foundation. So on the visionary side, on the, in the realm, if we talk about the realm of ideas, it's very important, I think, to collect all the information about similar projects throughout history. That's what my doctoral dissertation was about. I looked at the private cities throughout history, why people found them, why people moved there.
Sorry, actually, let me interject here, because many people, and even I don't know it. So was this a phenomenon in the past? How many private cities were existing in the past? Like as a rough idea.
A lot. If we go, I don't want to go too deep in history because the world was organized differently, but let's go back to the Middle Ages. A lot of European cities, including London, for example, were created by corporations of merchants who would get together and say, let's create a self-governance entity. We will create the right environment, we'll get rich, and we will reinvest our money into the city development. And the District of London, that's called the City of London, is still governed by an entity called the Corporation of the City of London. It's not a council. It dates back to that time. And until today, they're following the tradition. They have their own police. And even the king, to enter this territory, has to be formally invited by the Lord Mayor, which is a peculiar reminder about how it used to be. And then gradually we have forgotten that. So initially the word corporation, there was no clear distinction between a private corporation and a municipal corporation. And most of the public places were built by this kind of benevolent private merchants, private capital. A lot of charities were provided. And then we forgot it. In economics, it's called crowding out, when the government crowds out private actors from some industries, some spheres of life, spheres of economics. They come and say, okay, we are taking care of the healthcare now. And then they say, oh, okay, the market cannot take care of it because you see they're not doing it. But why would they do? Because if you have to compete with a government monopoly. So as a few people already said today, instead of trying to change the existing systems, why don't we peacefully build parallel ones and prove to everyone that it works? Build a city that's built on open consent, build a city where private capital, the private developer can provide public spaces, can provide public services, infrastructure, and it will be not just for, as they say, this is just for the rich. Well, the rich already have all the opportunities, financial and otherwise, to choose wherever they want to live. They have places like Monaco, they have places like Dubai. They already have, enough resources to repatriate their money, to pay less taxes. It's about places like Morazan in Honduras, which is a free city for the working class. It is I think this is a tool to get a lot of people worldwide out of poverty, and it's a tool for social progress, but it's also a huge market for this because there are many more emerging countries than there are rich and developed countries. There are many more poor people who are struggling to escape poverty than there are people who are sitting in their offices and thinking, okay, how should I, invest my money so they make more money? So yes, people, again, in Honduras. Why Honduras? Because these projects, I think they have the biggest potential in countries that have basically run by failing governments. You create a refuge from bad institutions. People want to escape if they live in a country that is... So you can have, if you live in Germany, you may complain about, trains not coming on time or taxes rising, but you can cope with that. If you live in Honduras and it's dangerous to go out in the street and people are risking their lives boarding boats, crossing bay to get to America because they are so desperate, then if you create something like Morazan or Prospera, that's going to be a huge, huge deal breaker.
But building a parallel infrastructure only works, I would say, if you are granted a number of liberties. Because let's say, if I would try to do this in Germany, I would still have to pay all the taxes here and all the, the social costs and whatnot. And then on top of that, I would have to pay the private ones. So this clearly cannot work, right?
These are two separate issues, the economic and the legal one. So the economic side of private communities, it's quite a straightforward one. In the US, a lot of communities are run privately. For example, in developing world like India and Brazil as well. But we are talking here about the legal side. It's not just creating a privately run neighborhood. It's about creating a neighborhood that would have a special jurisdiction status, a neighborhood, a town, a city that will have some sort of a legal exemption from the host country, from the surrounding territory. And that's where the tricky part starts. Because you kind of trying to create a refuge from the bad institution, but you rely on those same bad institution. That's what I call the catch-22 of private cities. You have to rely on the same institution and hope that the government doesn't change its mind, but then you can have another government, not always coming peacefully. Again, in places like Honduras, there have been several unconstitutional changes in the government in the past decades. And even in countries which are relative democracies, like in India, there was a very telling case, the city of Lavasa in the state of Maharashtra. It was built just following the model that I just described. It was a private developer, but it was a city not for the affluent, not for the rich. It was a city for the local Indians who used to live in villages, in huts. And in exchange for selling their land to the developer, they got not just money, but also jobs in the city. And it was meant to become a resort. It became a place where elderly Indians would retire because the cities are so dirty and the air is not clean and the traffic is chaotic and you want a peaceful place to retire. But then it got entangled in political fights and it was stalled for about 10 years before continuing, lost a lot of investment, a lot of trust from investors. India is a democracy. It's flawed, but it's a democracy. But corruption kicks in. So that's the problem. And even if you take, a very democratic country, like arguably Canada, there was this story of Google trying to build a smart city near Toronto, and it was stalled by a public campaign. People who were afraid that Google will steal their data. I don't know why the same people who are very afraid of corporations stealing their data, never mind the government's doing it. Because Google doesn't have an army, Google doesn't have a police. The Toronto government does. But the same people think that's perfectly okay for them to know everything about us. But Google, it's very dangerous. So that's a side story. So even, if you take countries which have democracy, you might get the NIMBYs, people who are just against the development. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have more autocratic countries. You have some of the Middle Eastern countries are experimenting with these things. Titus mentioned NEOM in Saudi Arabia. It's a government-driven project, but they're trying to use this concept of one country, two systems. And some people are thinking that because, I've been working in architecture for 7 years, and it's easier to build a city from scratch in the Emirates in the desert than to get a permission to rebuild your own house in London. So that's why a lot of developers are looking into that direction. But these countries have threats on their own. And Saudi Arabia had a series of purges in 2018 when the current ruler imprisoned, in a luxury hotel, but it was still an imprisonment of his opponents. And for example, the Jeddah Tower, which is supposed to be the next tallest building in the world, the construction was stalled. And I think it's like a very telling symbol of what happens in these countries. They are not shielded from political instability. It's just another sort of instability. So I think that our biggest hope is in, the growing numbers, learning from each other, conferences like this. So usually around October is where my optimism peaks every year, because that's when we get here and you see people who are investing their own money, investing massive amount of their own time, and not giving up when there's another time the Constitutional Court breaks all the rules and says you're not supposed to be here, or the government thinks, okay, we've got enough investment, then we're going to usurp the profits. You learn from each other, you learn how to create better protection from that kind of instability, and you go forward.
As a final question, the motto of the conference, as you just mentioned, is from vision to reality this time. So now, where are we? Are we still in vision, or are we approaching reality?
I think we're approaching reality, but you make 2 steps forward, the government pushes you 1 step back, you make another 2 steps forward. So it takes lower. As Titus showed us in his keynote speech, that if you look at Cologne, which was a free city, historically, it took them 200 years to kick out the bishop and become a free city with its own court, its own governance system. If you look at Honduran charter cities, it took them 20 years to, at least start building. 20 years were spent on political deals and negotiations and securing investment. It's accelerating the pace of progress, the pace of development, because as many people have already said, we are more mobile as ever. And we are voting with our feet. People from all sorts of countries, rich countries, poor countries, have much more opportunity today to vote with their feet. The governments have to cope with that, and some of them will hopefully be more open to agreements like that, and some of them will be more reasonable and introduce the kind of regulations like the ZEDA law in Honduras, which allows you to create a country within a country with its own rules where people move voluntarily and trial different new innovative governance models and ways of living.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, hi Tatiana, thank you very much for taking time.
Thank you very much for your time.
Maybe you could introduce yourself briefly.
Yes, I'm an activist at Montelibero project based out of Montenegro. It is a libertarian project, decentralized DAO community. which we are quite proud of.
We're at the conference Liberty in a Lifetime, and that of course begs the question, why is liberty important for you, or what aspects of liberty are important for you? And maybe some people might argue, but we live in democracies, in modern countries, so the problem is solved, no? Is it not?
Oh, not really. I mean, there are so many aspects to it, but for me, I think one of the biggest ones is, and the one that is quite easy to see, is the whole monetary system, how it is designed to manipulate, make you poorer, how it controls the whole world. That's one of, if you go deeper into understanding how it all works, the inflation, national debts, etc., you will see, that there is the monetary system, which is a very big aspect in community exchange in value. You will see how not reliable it actually is, and that's where you kind of start from. And then from there, you'll, of course, go into, liberty and how the government, starting the most free, it actually ends up the most corrupt, spending crazy money, issuing some laws that are absolutely, limiting people's rights, where they decide almost all minor things for you. So no, this is not freedom, really.
Your project is called Montelibero? Montelibero. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, this project, it started as a conversation between libertarians, voluntarists, mostly Russian programmers. It started online, people discussing what can we do, how can we get closer to freedom, what are the steps. And then some of the members, they made a decision to move to Montenegro and actually start physical project based there. The first people who moved, it happened in 2021. And since then, lots of projects have been going on in Montenegro, and now more than 200 people already relocated to Montenegro. But we have much more people actually participating remotely in tokenomics, in the fund, different projects funded by Montelibero.
So there are several hundred people in Montenegro.
Yeah, the members of the community, but also we have a lot in Serbia, we have a lot in Europe, and they do travel, they come over to visit. Not everyone is ready to relocate to Montenegro, as you can imagine. It is not the easiest place to easily relocate to, but yeah, we see more and more people arriving.
Could you describe a little bit more what this project exactly does? Is it something like a free city, as I had already mentioned in this podcast?
The way it started is, think of it as Free State project, where they said, okay, guys, let's move to New Hampshire, as many people as possible, and then see what difference we can make in specific physical location, what kind of influence we can make. We kind of have similar idea. Let's relocate, let's have a base where we motivate each other to do better, to help each other with the business, to help each other prosper, and then surround each other with the right people who are like-minded people. So that's kind of the main focus of the community. But then again, you don't have to be physically there to participate. We do have the city, Montelibero city that we are building. We do have different physical projects, but there are ways to participate remotely. If relocating is not for you, you can still participate.
So what could I do remotely?
Oh, you can do many things. For example, we have several funds in Montelibero, but one of the biggest one is called the First Montelibero Fund, which is more than 2.7 million euros worth. For example, you could invest into that fund and start getting dividends by purchasing MTL tokens. You could come to the fund and maybe ask for support, financial support, if you want to start some good business within the community. You could contribute by, we have Montewiki, the kind of Wikipedia that is based in our community. You could contribute with the information there. This is like open source, similar to Wikipedia. You could contribute by creating different applications, maintaining the chats. There are so many things you can do.
So what the project is, if I understand it correctly, oriented around business opportunities?
Yeah, we want to be physically located close to each other, but the main idea is We want to create the economy where we can prosper. I think it's very important for people to know that they can fully kind of invest their time and energy, and they don't have to go and like earn money in some like corporate business that completely contradicts their values, for example. But actually we provide, we have our own tokenomics, we have our own stable coin. You can create your own token. Our community members created over 100 tokens already. We show how to do it, and we basically just give the tools. There is a fund if you need extra funding. There is people, the community, if you need extra resources, some brain force, some business partners. Now in the Montelibero city, we are actually creating the Techno Park. So we want it to be like a startup hub where you come, you learn, but you're very quick to start something. So it's not just like learning 5 years. There is the resource, it's there. You get like-minded people who are very wired to success and with as little involvement by the government as possible, and it's all happening now in Montenegro.
But it's still operating within the law and the systems of Montenegro.
Yes, this is true. In that sense, Montenegro was chosen as one of the most free economy for this type of community. We try to actually kind of maintain good relationship with the government. And again, we are a decentralized community. Some people think, we shouldn't have anything to do with the government. We should just be completely anarchist, just doing our thing, because we act lawfully within the rules of Montenegro. Tokenomics is allowed. But again, there are some people who are, for example, prepared if anything goes wrong in Montenegro, they change some laws, we can go and do seasteading, for example, because we are actually near the port, and the port is actually a free economic zone as well in Bar. So we are kind of open to those options, but that's the way we're doing it now.
The motto of the conference is from vision to reality. So how far do you see reality away from your vision?
If I speak from Montelibero perspective, I see how much has been achieved and how much has been done in a few years. But we understand that just our community on its own, I look at it as a social experiment. We are trying to get closer to freedom, and I'm very happy that there are other communities and other ways of people to try to achieve that freedom, like free cities, free economic zones. Some other people who just bought lots of land and announced themselves like they have nothing to, like Liberland, for example. I love that there are so many different projects, and I think we should maintain the relationship, try to maybe integrate some of the services, for example, exchanging tokenomics, our own tokens would be great. Let's just create as many of those places as possible and then see what succeeds and then maybe copy some practice, join. So that's the way towards freedom that I see. Yeah.
I think that is a very interesting aspect that I see also in the discussion or the conversation with Titus Gebel. The idea to allow for experiments, to try out different things, not like to leave the current tracks that we are in. But always, of course, with the risk or with the possibility to fail, right? But so then I understand that you don't see only your project, but you see more like you are one puzzle piece, if you will, and you try to interact with other projects. This is maybe as important. Am I seeing this right?
Yeah, exactly. It's as important. And that's why, we try to keep track of what other communities are doing. If somebody created some, let's say, social network that is applicable for free cities, or if somebody created some, a token that the fund maybe that we can become part of, we look at all those opportunities. We signed the voluntarist covenant that was started by Liberstad, the community in Norway. So we showed that we actually, share the values and support it, and we just love all this ideas to, for example, I know now we actually have a Montelibero court. We have our own court system in the community, and we've had already 5 cases. And Liberland, for example, was very interested that we are doing it, and potentially other communities could maybe even use our service, because we actually have judges who worked for many years in the court system, actually. And now you can just come, pay a little fee, and get the resolution. So it's so important to integrate and share the experiences.
Very interesting. Maybe you can tell our listeners where could they find more information about your project, about yourself, or whatever you think is important to share. Also, maybe as a remark, all of these references will, of course, be in the show notes, and you can just look on the show notes and follow it up from there.
I think a great place to start, Free Cities Foundation website. But from Montelibero's perspective, you are welcome to come to our Wikipedia. It's in Russian and in English, monte.wiki. And also the website, montelibero.org. There will be more things mentioned during the presentations at the Liberty in Our Lifetime. So I just recommend watch it after, because there will be lots of useful links. I don't remember all of them on top of my mind. But I encourage you guys to really, pay attention. And there are lots of great things happening, join in with whatever energy you have, but participate in it. It really matters to us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So, this is the end of the first episode. Thanks to Massimo, Vera and Tatiana for sharing their ideas on liberty, the conference, and introducing the particular projects or initiatives. Please stay tuned for part 2 with Lauren Razavi, explaining how she's building an online country for digital nomads, Grant Romand sharing his ideas on floating homes, and finally, Peter Young from the Free Cities Foundation, reflecting on free cities but also on the Liberty in Our Lifetimes conference in Prague 2024. I wish you good morning, a great day, or a relaxing evening whenever you're listening. Share this if you like it. Hear you soon.